Hello, my dear listeners, and welcome back to Super English Talks, the channel where we explore ideas that not only help you improve your English, but also help you think more clearly, grow with awareness, and live with a little more intention every day. I'm really happy that you're here with me today, because in this episode, we're going to talk about something that's very close to my heart. And probably important to you too. It's a skill that most of us were never really taught in school. Yet, it quietly affects everything we do. Every goal we set, every new challenge we face, and every dream we try to make real. That skill is learning how to learn. It's sometimes called the meta skill, the skill that lives underneath all other skills. Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried really hard to learn something new? Maybe it was English. Maybe it was a new job, a hobby, or even just learning to handle a difficult time in your life. You gave your best effort. You studied, practiced, watched videos, read books. But somehow, it felt like you weren't making much progress. Like you were moving, but not moving forward. I know that feeling. I've been there more than once. And in those moments, it's easy to think, maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I just don't have what it takes. But what if the problem isn't you? What if it's the method? What if no one ever actually showed you how to learn effectively? Not just how to memorize information for a test, but how to truly understand and remember new ideas in a deep, lasting way. A few years ago, I went through a time of big change. I had to learn many new skills at once. I was starting fresh in a different environment. And at first, I did what most people do. I made long to-do lists, I watched tutorials, I read every book I could find. I was busy all the time, but very little was sticking. I felt tired, lost, and, honestly, a bit defeated. Then one day, I had a simple but powerful realization. Information isn't transformation. You can read hundreds of books, watch all the videos, and still not change. If you don't know how your brain works, how habits form, and how your emotions affect your memory. Once I understood that, everything started to shift. I stopped focusing only on what I was learning and started paying attention to how I was learning. That one shift changed the way I approached everything. From learning a language to building a career to understanding myself. So why are we talking about this today? Especially here on a podcast for advanced English learners? Because mastering English, especially as an adult, is not just about learning words and grammar rules. It's about developing patience, consistency, and strategy. It's about building the right habits, managing frustration, and staying curious even when progress feels slow. In other words, it's about understanding your own learning process. That's what learning how to learn really means. Think about it. Every day, the world is changing faster than ever. Technology, jobs, communication, everything keeps evolving. The people who keep growing are not the ones who know the most facts. They're the ones who know how to keep learning, unlearning, and relearning throughout their lives. So, before we go deeper, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect. When was the last time you thought about how you learn, not just what you learn? How do you talk to yourself when something feels hard or confusing? Do you get frustrated and say, "I'll never get this"? Or do you remind yourself that struggle is part of the process? Sometimes, the biggest barrier isn't our ability. It's the beliefs we hold about our ability. If you believe you can improve, you will. If you believe your mind can grow, it will. So, as we move through this episode, keep this in mind. The ability to learn is not fixed. It's not something you're born with or without. It's a skill, one that you can practice, shape, and strengthen over time. And the more aware you become of your own patterns, your mindset, and your methods, the more enjoyable and effective your learning journey will be. Because when you learn how to learn, you unlock every other skill in life. It's like finding the master key that opens all the doors to your potential. So, take a deep breath. Slow down. Let's explore this together. And by the end of today's episode, you'll walk away not just knowing more English, but understanding yourself as a learner a little better. Let's get started. What exactly is the metaskill? Let's unpack that phrase, learning how to learn. On the surface, it sounds obvious, but most of us were never taught this. We were taught what to learn, dates in history, math formulas, grammar rules. Rarely did anyone show us how our minds actually work or how to learn in a way that's flexible, calm, and sustainable. At its heart, learning how to learn means building cognitive flexibility. That's a long way of saying the ability to change how you think when you face something new or difficult. It's not just about taking in facts. It's about changing the way you approach problems and information. Think of it this way. Knowledge is the content, the what. The metaskill is the container, the how. It's the method, the mindset, and the habit that hold everything else together. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, how do you usually learn something new? Do you start by memorizing? Do you take notes and reread them? Do you watch a few videos and hope it sinks in? Those methods are common and they can help, but often they stay on the surface. They don't make your understanding strong or flexible when things change. This is where mental models matter. Mental models are simple frameworks you carry in your mind. They help you decide, solve problems, and connect new ideas to things you already know. For example, one mental model for language learning is, every mistake is information, not failure. If you believe that, you'll speak more, try more, and learn faster. Mistakes stop being terrifying and become signals that point the way forward. Another big part of the metaskill is self-regulation. Self-regulated learners don't just absorb facts. They plan, check how they're doing, and change course when needed. If something isn't working, they notice and adjust. They don't rely only on motivation. They build small systems, routines, feedback, and practice that keep them moving forward. Think of learning like training your body. You wouldn't go to the gym once and expect to be strong for life. Learning is the same, repeated effort, feedback, and time. The good news is once you build this metaskill, learning anything else becomes easier because you've built a strong foundation. Traditional schooling often focuses on outcomes. Pass the test, finish the book, get the certificate. Learning how to learn shifts your focus from results to process. It invites curiosity, resilience, and deeper engagement. Instead of asking, how fast can I finish this? You start asking, how well do I understand this? That question changes everything. Now, you might wonder, is this metaskill something you're born with, or can you train it? The answer is, you can definitely train it. Like any complex skill, it needs knowledge, practice, and honest self-awareness. Many learners chase external tools, apps, flashcards, videos, and forget to look at their internal tools, habits, assumptions, feelings, and attention. So stop for a second and reflect on your own habits. When something feels hard, what do you do first? Do you push through without a plan? Do you avoid it? Do you say, I'm not smart enough, or I'm too old? Those internal reactions matter a lot. They shape whether you keep trying or give up. Learning is not only mental. It's emotional and behavioral, and sometimes even spiritual. Which brings us to one of the most important but overlooked parts of the metaskill, self-compassion. Self-compassion means treating yourself with kindness while you learn. It means saying, this is hard right now, and that's okay, instead of beating yourself up. When you are kind to yourself, you reduce fear, you try more things, and you learn faster. Self-compassion fuels curiosity and keeps you in the game. So to summarize, the meta skill, learning how to learn, is about building flexible thinking, using helpful mental models, managing your own learning process, and being kind to yourself along the way. It's trainable. It transforms your approach to every topic, including language learning. Take a breath. Notice one small change you can try today: a new mental model, a brief plan before you study, or a kinder inner voice when you make a mistake. Small shifts like that add up. And before long, you'll find yourself learning more easily, with less struggle and more joy. The role of mindset in learning. We humans can be incredibly hard on ourselves when we don't learn something as quickly as we hoped. We think, I should already know this, or maybe I'm just not good enough. But research tells a different story. People who treat themselves with kindness, who accept struggle as a normal and necessary part of learning, actually learn more effectively over time. Why? Because they're not trapped in that exhausting cycle of frustration and self-doubt. They stay open, curious, and engaged. So when we talk about learning how to learn, we're not just talking about memorization tricks or study hacks, although those can be helpful. We're talking about building a more intelligent relationship with your own mind, a relationship that helps you grow, adapt, and keep moving forward, even when things feel uncertain or difficult. Let me leave you with a question to think about. If your current learning habits stayed exactly the same for the next 5 years, where would they take you? Would they move you closer to your goals? Would they expand your potential? Or would they quietly hold you back? That's the real power of the meta-skill agency. The ability to take charge of your learning instead of just reacting to it. And once you understand that, you stop being just a student of English or business or coding, and you become a student of learning itself. And that, I believe, is where real growth begins. The role of mindset, fixed versus growth. When we think about learning, we usually focus on the techniques. How many hours we study, what apps we use, or how we take notes. But beneath all of that lies something deeper. Something that quietly shapes whether we succeed or give up. That something is mindset. The set of beliefs we hold about ourselves, our abilities, and what's possible for us. You might have heard of psychologist Carol Dweck's idea of the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Here's the difference in simple terms. A fixed mindset is when you believe your intelligence and talents are fixed, that you're born a certain way and that's it. You might say things like, I'm not a math person. I'm terrible with languages. Or, I just don't have the memory for this. A growth mindset, on the other hand, is when you believe your abilities can be developed through effort, feedback, and practice. It's the belief that you can improve, step by step, if you stay patient and consistent. At first, this might sound like a simple idea, but it's actually a powerful lens through which to view your entire learning journey. Because whether you realize it or not, your mindset creates the emotional environment in which your learning happens. And that environment can either nourish your progress or quietly sabotage it. Think about it. Have you ever started something new, maybe a language, a musical instrument, or a new role at work, and found yourself saying things like, I'll never get this, or I'm too old to learn, or I just don't have the talent? Those thoughts may feel true in the moment, but most of the time, they're just stories. Stories we've collected from childhood, from school, from family or society. Stories that say learning is only for the naturally gifted. But the growth mindset challenges those stories. It reminds you that learning isn't a test to prove your worth. It's a process of becoming. a journey of effort, reflection, and continuous transformation. When you believe that you can improve, you start taking small, consistent actions. You stop avoiding mistakes and start learning from them. You experiment more and fear less. In the end, that's what separates learners who grow from those who give up too soon. It's not intelligence. It's not age. It's mindset. The quiet belief that effort and strategy will lead you forward. So, next time you catch yourself thinking, I can't do this, pause, take a breath, and add one small word, yet. I can't do this, yet. That single word opens the door to possibility. And that's the beginning of true learning. The power of mindset and the brain. When you adopt a growth mindset, something powerful happens. Failure stops being a final verdict, it becomes feedback. It turns into a message, a signal pointing you toward what to improve next. Failure becomes a step, not a wall. A necessary part of progress on the way to mastery. Of course, shifting your mindset isn't easy. Old habits and old beliefs can hold on tightly. You might have grown up believing that talent is something you either have or don't have. And when things get hard, those old voices often come back, telling you you're not smart enough or that maybe you've hit your limit. But here's the truth, your brain is adaptable. It can change, grow, and rewire itself when you give it the chance. You are not stuck with the mindset you started with. You can train your mind to think in new, more helpful ways. One of the best places to begin is with self-talk. The quiet voice inside your head that comments on everything you do. Start paying attention to what it's saying. Notice the moments when you're harsh with yourself, or when you make sweeping statements like, I'm terrible at this, or I'll never get it. When you catch those thoughts, pause and ask yourself, is that really true? What proof do I actually have? Most of the time, those thoughts don't stand up to the facts. They're habits of thinking, not reality. And the more you question them, the weaker they become. Another key idea of the growth mindset is the belief that effort and strategy both matter. It's not about working endlessly or forcing yourself to grind until you're exhausted. It's about working intelligently. Good learners don't just try harder, they try smarter. They use feedback, experiment with new approaches, and stay flexible when something isn't working. For example, imagine someone studying English. They could repeat vocabulary for hours and still struggle to remember. But if they reflect and realize, maybe I learn better through stories or by using words in real conversations, they're already applying strategy, not just effort. That's the power of the growth mindset in action. But here's something people often overlook. Mindset isn't just personal. It's also shaped by the environment around you. If you grew up in a place where mistakes were punished, or where people believed intelligence was a fixed gift, it can be harder to believe that growth is possible. That's why it's so important to be intentional now. To choose a new way of thinking that supports your goals and your potential. Let me share a small example from my own experience. When I first started learning English deeply, I used to get frustrated whenever I couldn't understand something right away. I'd tell myself, I'm just not a natural at this. It was discouraging. But when I learned about the growth mindset, I realized that my focus was in the wrong place. I was obsessed with quick results instead of the process. So I began to reframe my thinking. I told myself, this is hard right now, but that's part of getting better. That simple shift helped me stay consistent on days when I felt stuck or wanted to quit. So let me ask you a question. When you face a challenge in learning, maybe a tough grammar rule, a confusing lesson, or a new concept at work, what's your first reaction? Do you blame a lack of talent? Do you think, I'll never get this? Or can you pause, take a breath, and see the difficulty as part of a bigger journey, as something shaping you into a stronger, more capable learner. Remember this: mindset is not a fixed trait. It's a choice, one that you can make again and again, every day. You can choose to be your own ally instead of your harshest critic. You can choose to see setbacks as stepping stones instead of stop signs. And when you do that, you give yourself the best chance to grow. Not just in learning English, but in everything you do. Your beliefs about yourself are like the soil where your learning grows. If the soil is dry and full of doubt, progress will always feel difficult. But if you nourish it with curiosity, patience, and self-kindness, you'll be amazed by what begins to bloom. The neuroscience of learning. Now that we've explored mindset and how it shapes your learning, let's take a short journey into the brain itself. Don't worry, we won't get too technical here. But understanding even a little bit about how your brain works can completely change the way you learn. It reminds you that learning isn't just about working harder. It's about working smarter, in harmony with how your brain naturally learns and grows. Let's start with one of the most fascinating discoveries in modern science, a concept called neuroplasticity. Instead of pushing yourself to study for hours until you're completely drained, try this: study in shorter, focused sessions, then take breaks. Let your brain breathe. This helps it organize and strengthen what you've just learned. You can think of it like watering your mental garden, not too much all at once, but just enough at the right times. Here's a simple way to picture it. When you study, you're giving your brain new building blocks. When you rest, your brain quietly arranges those blocks into a strong structure. Both learning and resting are part of the process. So, taking a break isn't being lazy, it's being smart. Now, let's talk about how emotion affects learning. Your brain doesn't work like a cold machine. It's deeply connected to how you feel. When you're stressed, anxious, or afraid of making mistakes, your brain goes into protection mode. It focuses on survival, not learning. That's why when you're nervous before a test, it can feel like all the information disappears. Your brain is simply overwhelmed. But when you feel curious, calm, or motivated, your brain releases chemicals like dopamine, the feel-good chemical that boosts focus and memory. So, one of the best ways to learn better isn't just to push harder, but to make learning enjoyable. Listen to content you like, use examples that interest you, and celebrate small wins. Each positive emotion gives your brain a reason to keep going. Another key idea from neuroscience is connection. Your brain loves to link new knowledge with what it already knows. When you connect new ideas to your past experiences or familiar concepts, they stick more easily. That's why stories, analogies, or visual examples help you remember things better. For example, when learning a new English word, don't just memorize it, connect it. Use it in a sentence about your own life. Imagine a picture or a short story using that word. Each connection you make strengthens the neural pathways, the communication lines in your brain. You can think of these pathways as roads. At first, when you learn something new, the road is small, rough, and hard to travel. But the more you use it, through practice, review, and repetition, it becomes wider and smoother. Eventually, it turns into a highway that your brain can travel easily. That's how mastery is built, not through talent, but through consistent effort. And here's something powerful to remember. Every time you make a mistake, your brain learns. Mistakes create opportunities for your brain to adjust and build stronger connections. So, instead of feeling bad when you get something wrong, remind yourself that your brain is literally growing in that moment. All of this shows that learning is not magic, it's biology. Your brain is built to learn, adapt, and improve for your entire life. The key is to work with it, not against it. So, the next time you sit down to study or practice English, remember, focus on quality, not just quantity. Take breaks and get enough sleep. Keep your emotions positive and curious. Make connections between new and old ideas. And above all, be patient with yourself. Your brain is like a living garden. Every word you learn, every sentence you practice, every effort you make, it all adds up. Nurture it with time, care, and kindness, and you'll see your learning grow stronger, deeper, and more natural every day. When you want to learn something deeply, like English, a skill, or any subject, the secret isn't studying for hours just once in a while. The real progress happens when you make learning a small, steady part of your daily life. Think of it like exercise. If you go to the gym one day and train for 6 hours, you'll be sore and tired, but not necessarily stronger. However, if you move your body a little every day, the change happens quietly but powerfully. The same is true for your brain. So instead of trying to memorize long lists of words or spend endless hours studying, try shorter, focused sessions with small breaks in between. Your brain can only hold a limited amount of information at one time. When you give it space to rest, it processes what you've learned, making those memories stronger. You don't need to push harder, you need to learn smarter. Here's one powerful idea that helps. Create connections instead of just memorizing. When you try to remember something new, connect it to something you already know. Turn it into a story, a picture, or an example from your life. For instance, if you're learning the word breeze, imagine a light wind touching your face during a calm afternoon. If you connect that image with the word, you'll remember it much faster and it'll stay in your mind much longer. Learning isn't about filling your brain like a bucket of water. It's more like growing a garden. You can't just pour water once and expect plants to grow instantly. You need to water them regularly, give them sunlight, and wait patiently as they take root. Your brain works the same way. Every time you review, rest, or practice, you're giving your mental garden the care it needs to grow. Sometimes you won't see results right away, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. Beneath the surface, your brain is building stronger pathways and connections. Then, one day, everything clicks, and you realize how much you've grown. That's why forgetting isn't failure. When you forget something and then remember it again, you're actually strengthening your memory. Each time you recall information, those brain connections get thicker and more reliable. So instead of feeling guilty when you forget, see it as proof that your brain is working, trimming old branches to make space for new growth. Learning how your brain works gives you power. You no longer have to feel confused, stuck, or frustrated. You understand that growth takes time, repetition, and the right rhythm. You become, as I like to say, a gardener of your own mind, patient, curious, and kind, turning learning into a daily habit. Now let's talk about how to make learning a natural part of your everyday routine. You don't need big bursts of motivation or energy. What you need are habits and systems, small actions that happen automatically, even on days when you don't feel inspired. Here's the truth: motivation fades, but habits last. So how do you build them? Let's look at a few simple but powerful strategies backed by neuroscience. 1. Spaced repetition, learning that lasts. Spaced repetition is one of the most effective learning methods ever discovered. It means reviewing what you've learned several times, but with increasing gaps between each review. For example, Day 1, learn 10 new words. Day 3, review those same 10 words. Day 7, review them again. Day 14, review one last time. This pattern tells your brain, this information is important, don't forget it. Each review strengthens the connection until it becomes long-term memory. You can think of it like watering your plants. At first, they need water often. But as they grow stronger, they need it less frequently. 2. Active recall, the mental workout. Another powerful tool is active recall. This simply means testing yourself instead of just rereading or listening passively. For example, after reading new vocabulary, close your notebook and try to remember the meanings without looking. Or ask yourself, what were the 3 main ideas I just learned? Each time you try to recall information from memory, you're giving your brain a mini workout. The harder it feels, the more your brain grows. Passive reading feels easy, but it doesn't build strong memory. Active recall might feel uncomfortable, but that's where true learning happens. 3. Habit building, making learning automatic. Even the best techniques won't help if you don't do them regularly. That's why habits are key. Here's something surprising. Scientists say 40 to 60% of everything we do each day is driven by habit. That means your daily routines, brushing your teeth, checking your phone, making tea happen almost automatically. So, if you attach learning to an existing habit, it becomes effortless over time. For example, review vocabulary right after breakfast. Listen to an English podcast while walking. Read a short paragraph before bed. These small actions don't require much willpower, but they add up. Soon, learning becomes a natural part of your day, like breathing or walking. The secret formula. So, here's a simple formula to make your learning journey smooth and powerful. Small steps plus consistency plus curiosity equals big progress. Don't chase perfection. Focus on progress. Don't worry if you miss a day. What matters is coming back again and again. Each moment of effort is a drop of water in your garden of learning. It may not look like much today, but one day, you'll look back and realize that every drop made something beautiful grow. Think about the small things you do every day, brushing your teeth, checking your phone, or making your morning coffee. You don't really think about them, right? They just happen. That's the quiet power of habits. Once something becomes a habit, it doesn't take much energy or motivation anymore. It simply becomes part of who you are. Now, imagine using that same power to help you learn. This is where a clever idea called habit stacking comes in. Habit stacking means connecting a new habit with one you already have. You stack them together so the first one becomes a reminder for the second. For example, if you always drink tea in the morning, you can decide that every time you make tea, you'll review a few English flashcards or listen to a short podcast episode. The habit of making tea is already automatic, so now it naturally triggers your new learning habit too. You don't have to fight against laziness or wait for motivation to appear. You just attach learning to something that's already part of your routine. That's how small, smart habits quietly build big results over time. Designing your environment for learning. There's another powerful idea that many people overlook: environment design. Your surroundings shape your behavior more than you might realize. If your English book is buried at the bottom of your bag, or your learning app is hidden in a folder on your phone, you're less likely to use them. But if your book is open on the kitchen table, or your phone reminds you every morning to practice, your environment gently nudges you toward learning without you even noticing. You can think of your environment as a silent teacher, one that either supports you or distracts you. So, take a look around. Does your space make learning easy and inviting? Or does it make it harder to begin? Even small changes can make a big difference. Maybe you keep your notebook next to your coffee cup. Maybe you put your earphones beside your bed so you remember to listen to English before sleeping. Maybe you turn your home screen into a little learning hub. These little shifts might seem tiny, but they work like adjusting the sails of a ship. Each adjustment changes your direction slightly, and over time, Those small adjustments can take you to a completely different destination. The power of small, steady steps. Here's something important to remember. Consistency matters more than intensity. Studying for 3 hours once a week might feel productive, but your brain learns best through short, regular sessions. Even 10 or 15 minutes a day can be more effective than long, exhausting study sessions that happen once in a while. Think of learning as keeping a small fire alive. You don't dump all your wood at once and walk away. You add small pieces regularly, keeping the fire burning bright. So instead of asking, "How long should I study?" try asking, "How often can I show up?" Because showing up even for a few minutes builds momentum. And momentum is what keeps you growing. Building systems that support your learning. But habits alone aren't everything. Life can be unpredictable. Some days, you'll feel tired or busy. That's why it helps to build systems, simple structures that support you when motivation fades. A system might include tracking your progress, setting weekly goals, or celebrating small wins. It might mean joining an online community or sharing your progress with a friend who encourages you. Systems keep you on track even when your energy dips. They create a rhythm, a structure, a gentle reminder that says, "Keep going. You're doing great." When you have systems in place, learning becomes something you live with, not something you struggle for. Reflecting on your habits. Before we wrap up, take a moment to reflect. How much of your daily life do you design on purpose? And how much just happens automatically on autopilot? Are there moments in your day, like your commute, your morning routine, or your breaks, that you could gently turn into learning opportunities? You don't have to make big changes. Start small. Maybe you review 5 new words while waiting for your coffee to brew. Maybe you listen to English on your walk home. Each small, intentional action is like planting a new seed. It doesn't take much time, but it slowly grows into something strong and lasting. A gentle reminder. Learning how to learn isn't just about finding smart tricks or getting motivated for a few days. It's about designing your life so that learning fits naturally into it. It's about building habits and systems that work for you, ones that match your rhythm, your goals, and your lifestyle. So as you move forward, take a moment to notice your daily patterns. What helps you focus? What distracts you? What small change could you make tomorrow to bring you just one step closer to your goals? Because in the end, the magic of learning doesn't come from massive effort. It comes from gentle, consistent action, from building a life where learning isn't a task you have to remember, but a habit you simply live. That's the quiet power of habits and systems. Learning isn't just something that happens in your mind. It's not only about memorizing facts, repeating words, or practicing grammar. If it were only mental, learning would be easy, a simple step-by-step process. But we both know it's not that simple. Learning is emotional. It's personal. It's messy and human. When you learn something new, you're not just training your brain, you're stretching your comfort zone. And that process wakes up a whole range of feelings. Sometimes it's excitement, that spark when something finally clicks. Sometimes it's curiosity or pride, that warm feeling when you realize, "Wow, I'm actually improving." But other times, learning can stir up frustration, doubt, or even fear. Maybe you've been studying hard, but progress feels painfully slow. Maybe you understand most things, but one concept just won't make sense. Or maybe you've hit a plateau, that strange place where you keep putting in effort but don't see much change. If you've ever felt any of that, the frustration, the confusion, the self-doubt, you're not alone. Everyone who learns deeply goes through these emotional valleys. It's part of the journey. The key difference isn't whether you feel these emotions, but how you handle them. The emotional side of learning. Think of learning like a roller coaster. There are moments when you feel unstoppable, the highs where everything clicks and you feel on top of the world. But then there are the dips, the days when you question yourself, when nothing seems to work, when your confidence starts to shake. Those ups and downs are completely normal. The important thing is how you respond when you're in the valley, when you're tired, frustrated, or tempted to give up. Ask yourself this. When things get hard, what's your first reaction? Do you feel discouraged? Do you tell yourself maybe you're not good enough? Or can you stay curious, patient, and kind to yourself even when it's uncomfortable? That's what emotional resilience is, the ability to keep going even when the road gets bumpy. Learning to handle frustration. One of the most important emotional skills for any learner is frustration tolerance, the ability to sit with discomfort without giving up. Frustration is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're growing. When you're frustrated, it means your brain is stretching to make new connections, to go beyond what it already knows. You're standing right at the edge of progress, and that's where real growth happens. But it's also true that frustration feels uncomfortable. You might feel stuck or impatient, and your mind may whisper, "Why am I not getting this yet?" Think of it like climbing a mountain. The steep part of the climb is exhausting, and sometimes you want to turn back. But if you keep going, step by step, you reach the top, and that view makes every struggle worth it. Frustration is the steep part of your learning climb. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary. Overcoming the fear of failure. Another emotional barrier that many learners face is the fear of failure. That voice in your head that says, "What if I'm not smart enough? What if I embarrass myself? What if I just can't do it?" These thoughts can be powerful. They can make you hold back, stay silent, or stop trying even when you're capable of so much more. But here's the truth. Failure isn't the opposite of success. Failure is part of success. Every mistake teaches you something valuable. Each time you fall short, your brain gets feedback, information it can use to adjust and grow stronger next time. Think of failure like a sculptor carving a statue. Each strike of the hammer, each chipped piece, shapes the final form. The process may look rough from the outside, but that's how something beautiful emerges. So when you fail, don't see it as a wall. See it as a doorway, a step closer to understanding, to mastery, to confidence. Emotional literacy, understanding your feelings. Here's something we rarely talk about: emotional literacy. This means being able to recognize and understand your emotions instead of letting them control you. When you can pause and notice what you're feeling, frustration, boredom, fear, excitement, you create space to respond with intention rather than react out of habit. For example, instead of thinking, "I'm terrible at this," you could reframe it. "I'm feeling frustrated right now, and that's okay. It means I'm learning something challenging." That small shift is powerful. It turns frustration from an enemy into a signal, a reminder that you're growing. When you do this, you become your own coach instead of your own critic. You support yourself instead of tearing yourself down. And over time, that self-awareness builds resilience, the quiet strength to keep learning, even when it's tough. A gentle reflection. So, the next time you feel stuck, tired, or lost in your learning, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And what is this feeling trying to teach me? Remember, learning is not just about knowledge. It's about courage, patience, and self-compassion. It's about showing up, even when it's uncomfortable. Because the real strength of a learner isn't just in their mind, it's in their heart. And that emotional resilience, that quiet inner strength, is what turns effort into growth and struggle into transformation. Emotional literacy doesn't just help you handle the hard parts of learning, It also opens the door to joy, curiosity, and satisfaction. When you celebrate small wins, when you notice your own progress, when you pause to savor those little moments of insight, you're doing more than just feeling good. You're building positive feedback loops in your brain. You're teaching yourself that learning feels rewarding, and that feeling becomes fuel for resilience. But remember, resilience doesn't mean pushing through pain or forcing yourself to work when you're completely drained. True resilience is wiser than that. It knows when to persist, and it knows when to rest. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is to step back, take a deep breath, and let your mind recharge. Resilience is not about perfection or endurance. It's about balance, patience, and self-compassion. So here's a gentle question for you. When you face a tough moment in your learning journey, how do you usually respond? Do you push harder, hoping to break through the wall? Or do you step back to reflect and give yourself space to breathe? Can you hold space for your emotions, frustration, doubt, boredom, excitement, without judging them? Because this is what emotional literacy really is. It's not about avoiding difficult feelings. It's about understanding them, listening to what they're trying to tell you, and then choosing how to respond. Building emotional literacy and resilience is a gradual process. It doesn't happen overnight. But as you develop these inner skills, something beautiful begins to shift. Learning becomes less of a battle against yourself and more of a collaboration with yourself, with your mind, your heart, and your spirit working together. As you continue to explore the meta skill of learning how to learn, remember this. The emotional landscape you travel is just as important as the intellectual one. When you honor your feelings, face your fears, and nurture your resilience, you unlock a deeper kind of learning, one that transforms not only what you can do, but who you become in the process. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson of all. Learning through others, feedback, mentorship, and community. Up to this point, we've focused on the inner world of learning, your mindset, your habits, your emotions, and even how your brain works. But learning doesn't happen in isolation. In fact, some of the richest, most transformative learning experiences happen through other people. Think about it. A mentor who guides you, a peer who challenges your thinking, or a community that shares knowledge and support. All of these relationships form the social ecosystem of learning. There's an old saying, no one is an island. That's especially true when it comes to learning. Human beings are wired to connect, to share, and to grow together. Much of what we learn comes from the people around us. Consider the old apprenticeship model, a tradition that's been around for centuries. A young learner would study a craft by working side by side with an experienced master. They didn't just memorize instructions. They observed, imitated, asked questions, and received feedback in real time. And while this idea sounds old-fashioned, it's still alive today in classrooms, in workplaces, and even in digital communities. When you engage with others who share your goals, whether it's a study group, a language exchange partner, or an online forum, you step into a living, breathing learning network. The power of feedback. Within that network, feedback plays a starring role. Good feedback is more than just correction, it's a form of care. It's someone holding up a mirror and helping you see both your strengths and your blind spots. When feedback is given thoughtfully, it doesn't feel like criticism. It feels like guidance, a helping hand showing you where to step next. I once heard a mentor say, feedback is the breakfast of champions. And it's true. Without it, you might keep repeating the same mistakes or miss chances to grow. But with it, you can refine your skills, deepen your understanding, and gain confidence. Of course, receiving feedback isn't always easy. Sometimes it stings. It can make you feel defensive or uncertain, especially if you care deeply about your work. But if you can pause, take a breath, and see feedback for what it truly is, an opportunity to improve, it becomes one of the most valuable tools you'll ever have on your learning journey. If you can learn to listen with an open heart, to truly hear the intention behind the words, feedback becomes a powerful ally instead of something to fear. It helps to remember that feedback says more about the learning process than about your worth as a person. It's not a judgment of who you are. It's simply information that helps you grow. Learning through others doesn't stop at receiving feedback. It also includes collaborative learning, working together to solve problems, share ideas, or create something new. When you collaborate, you get exposed to different ways of thinking, new perspectives that can stretch your mind and challenge old assumptions. Have you ever noticed how talking about a difficult topic with a friend can suddenly make things clearer? That's the magic of dialogue. It pushes you to organize your thoughts, explain your reasoning, and sometimes even rethink your conclusions based on what you hear. And this social side of learning isn't limited to face-to-face moments anymore. In today's digital world, online communities have become vibrant, living classrooms. From Reddit discussions to language platforms like Duolingo, or even small Facebook or WhatsApp groups, learners gather to share tips, celebrate progress, and support one another. In many ways, these digital spaces echo the old apprenticeship model. Just like the masters and apprentices of the past, we now learn by observing, asking, imitating, and improving together, except now we can do it with people from all around the world. There's also something fascinating happening beneath the surface, a psychological process called mirroring. When you watch someone who's skilled, confident, or passionate, you often start to unconsciously imitate them. Their tone, their gestures, their attitude, it rubs off on you. That's why mentors and role models can be so powerful. They don't just teach through words. They teach through presence. Imagine a mentor who tells you, it's okay to struggle. It's part of learning, or keep practicing, you're improving every day. Those words can stay with you long after the conversation ends. They become part of your inner voice, your own gentle coach, reminding you to keep going when things get hard. So let me ask you, who plays that role in your life? Who encourages you, challenges you, or helps you see your progress more clearly? And how often do you ask for feedback or guidance from others? If you don't have someone like that right now, that's okay. You can start small. Join a study group, comment on a discussion forum, or message someone whose work you admire. Most people appreciate genuine curiosity and a desire to learn. Sometimes all it takes is a single message or a short conversation to open a door that leads somewhere unexpected. There's a saying I love, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's exactly what learning through others is about. It's about recognizing that growth is not a solo race, it's a shared adventure. When you welcome feedback, collaborate openly, and seek out mentors or supportive communities, you multiply your potential for learning and transformation. So, as you think about your own journey, take a moment to reflect on this. Who walks beside you on your path of learning? How might you deepen those connections? And just as importantly, how can you be a mentor or a source of encouragement for someone else? Because in the dance of learning, none of us moves alone. We grow, we stumble, we rise together. As we come toward the end of our journey exploring the meta skill of learning how to learn, it's a good moment to step back and look at the bigger picture. Because learning isn't just about collecting information, memorizing facts, or checking items off a list. Learning is much deeper than that. It's about change. Real change. Change that goes beyond the classroom, beyond the screen, and touches who we are at our core. Have you ever stopped to think about how learning shapes your identity? Not just what you know, but who you become as a person through the process. This is something psychologists and educators call transfer. Transfer is the ability to take what you've learned in one situation and apply it to new, sometimes surprising areas of life. This is where learning shows its real power. It is the bridge between knowledge and action, between ideas and real-life results. It's the moment when skills stop being abstract and start becoming part of who you are. Take learning a new language, for example. At first, it can feel like a purely academic task, memorizing vocabulary, learning grammar rules, practicing pronunciation. It may feel slow and mechanical at first, but over time, something deeper begins to happen. You start to see the world differently. You notice new cultural perspectives. You connect with people in ways that feel meaningful. And slowly, learning reshapes your sense of self. You might start to think differently. You might speak with more confidence. You might develop empathy for people or ideas you hadn't considered before. This is the kind of transformation that makes learning so powerful. Learning isn't just about filling a mental filing cabinet. It's about growth that spreads into every part of your life, your career, your relationships, and your personal development. In your career, for instance, the skills and knowledge you gain are like tools. They help you solve problems, handle challenges, and seize opportunities. But learning also shapes how you see yourself as a professional, as a worker, a leader, or a teammate. When you approach challenges with a growth mindset, for example, you're more willing to try new things, adapt to change, and innovate instead of resisting it. And learning affects your relationships too. The more you practice skills like active listening or thoughtful communication, the deeper your connections with others become. You're not just improving your ability to speak or write, you're building trust, understanding, and stronger bonds with the people around you. Perhaps most importantly, learning changes your internal dialogue, the way you talk to yourself about your abilities, your potential, and your future. When you start seeing learning as a lifelong journey, you begin to see yourself as a learner first and foremost. This learner identity is powerful. It opens doors to curiosity, resilience, and courage. It allows you to explore new paths, try new things, and embrace challenges without fear. Now, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect. Who are you becoming through your learning? Are you noticing subtle changes in the way you see yourself? Perhaps you're becoming more patient, more confident, or more open-minded. Maybe you're discovering strengths you didn't know you had. Or maybe you're starting to challenge beliefs that used to hold you back. These changes might feel small at first, almost invisible, like the slow unfolding of a flower. But over time, these small shifts add up. They accumulate into a transformation that feels authentic, deep, and lasting. It's like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. The caterpillar doesn't just grow bigger. It becomes something entirely new. Learning, when approached with intention and care, can do the same for you. It can change not only what you know but who you are, revealing a version of yourself that is more capable, curious, and alive. Learning invites us to look at the ways we think, the mental models we use to understand the world. These are the frameworks, the maps in our minds that help us make sense of new experiences. When we learn, these mental models evolve. They change and expand. And as they change, so does our ability to adapt, solve problems, and see new possibilities. This growth doesn't just affect what we do. It shapes the story we tell ourselves about who we are, what we can achieve, and where we're going in life. Learning isn't just about acquiring facts or skills. It changes our identity, the very way we see ourselves. This is what makes the meta skill, learning how to learn, so powerful. It's not just a skill to add to your toolbox. It's an identity to embrace. When you start seeing yourself as a lifelong learner, your mindset shifts. You start to welcome challenges instead of avoiding them. You seek meaning instead of rushing for results. You value growth in every part of your life, in your career, your relationships, and even in the way you think and act every day. So, as you continue on your journey, I encourage you to hold this question in your mind. Who are you becoming through your learning? What new possibilities are opening up for you? How might this evolving identity guide the next steps you take in your work, your relationships, or simply how you move through the world? Remember, learning is never just about reaching a destination or finishing a goal. The real magic happens in the process, in the slow, subtle changes in how you think, how you feel, and how you live. Each small insight, each new skill, each challenge you face is part of a larger transformation. When you embrace this broader view, learning stops being just about gaining knowledge. It becomes about crafting a richer, fuller life story. It becomes about shaping the person you want to be. And that, I believe, is the true essence of the meta skill. As we come to the close of this episode, take a moment to reflect on the journey we've shared. We started by exploring the idea of learning how to learn, the meta skill that quietly shapes everything else in our lives. Along the way, we talked about mindset, how our brains work, habits and systems, emotions, social connections, and the deep transformation that comes from learning itself. The takeaway I hope you carry with you is this: learning is far more than a task or a goal. It's a way of being. It's a way of approaching life with curiosity, patience, and openness. It's a practice that touches everything you do and slowly shapes who you are becoming. Learning is a continuous, evolving process, something we carry with us every day. It's not just about memorizing facts or completing tasks. It's about being present, curious, and compassionate with ourselves as we grow. I know that sometimes the idea of learning how to learn can feel abstract or even overwhelming. After all, learning is a complex dance between your mind, your heart, and the world around you. But here's the good news: you don't have to master it all at once. Like any meaningful skill, it develops through small, intentional steps. Maybe today your step is simply noticing how you react when you face a challenge. Do you pause and reflect, or do you rush to judgment? Perhaps it's asking yourself a gentle question like, what is this moment trying to teach me? Or maybe it's reaching out to a friend, mentor, or learning community to share your experiences. By becoming more aware of how you learn, noticing your habits, emotions, mindset, and patterns, you start to shift from being a passive receiver of information to an active, intentional learner. And that shift is powerful. It turns learning into a source of empowerment, curiosity, and joy, rather than pressure or frustration. Here's a question I invite you to carry with you. How much of your daily learning is guided by conscious intention? And how much happens by habit, routine, or autopilot? This isn't about judging yourself. It's about creating space for choice. When you bring awareness to your learning process, you open yourself up to experimentation, adaptation, and real growth. Remember, learning is deeply human. It involves making mistakes, facing frustrations, and sometimes feeling vulnerable. But it also brings joy, connection, and the excitement of discovery. When you embrace the full spectrum, the challenges as well as the rewards, you're not just building skills. You're nurturing resilience, curiosity, and self-compassion. So, what's next? Approach your learning with kindness and curiosity. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Reflect on challenges as opportunities to grow. And seek out the relationships, communities, and mentors that can support your journey. Learning how to learn is a lifelong adventure, and you are the author of your story. By choosing to engage with this meta skill, you're investing in a future filled with possibility, growth, and transformation. Thank you for joining me today on Super English Talks. I hope this episode has inspired you to see learning not just as something you do, but as something you live. Until next time, keep listening to your inner voice. Stay curious. Be patient and kind with yourself. And remember, the way you learn shapes the way you live. Take care and happy learning.